Reborn, my sister wanted me to fake being sick for her. I put out the incense burner. One incense stick later, screams from the yard. Play the full story in one go. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The exciting story begins right now. Third sister. Lie quietly in this four-poster bed and don't make a sound, even if the sky were to fall. If you interfere with my plans to go out tonight and retrieve that important item, you'll be in for it when mother calls you to account tomorrow. A voice, both alluring and tinged with a touch of arrogance, rang in my ear. I opened my eyes with a start, and what met my gaze was a rosewood four-poster bed draped in soft, autumn-scented gauze, and my elder sister, Mu Wan, standing by the bedside, hurriedly throwing a brocaded cloak over herself. A cloyingly sweet scent was wafting through the air around him in faint wisps. The scent was like a cold, venomous snake, slithering up through his nostrils and into every fiber of his being. My fingers, hidden beneath the brocade quilt, clenched suddenly, my fingernails nearly digging into the soft flesh of my palm. It was only through that stinging pain that I managed to barely suppress the trembling and the urge to vomit welling up in my throat. I've been reborn. I was reborn back to the night when the nightmare of my past life began. On this very night in my past life, Mu Wan did the same thing, claiming she had caught a cold. She forced me to put on her veil and lie in this four-poster bed pretending to be ill in her place. She said she had to go to the back chamber to meet a matron who had been sent in from outside to retrieve some personal belongings. Fearing the tactics of my stepmother, Lady Lin, I obediently did as she asked. But that wasn't some act of feigning illness at all, it was a deadly trap tailored specifically for me. What was burning in the bronze incense burner shaped like a crane spitting a pearl in the corner of the room was not some kind of calming incense at all, but drunken spring breeze, laced with a very heavy dose of muscle-weakening powder. In order to prevent her precious daughter from marrying Li Qingshan, the Marquis of Pingjiang, a man of violent temperament who had already tortured his 3 legal wives to death, Madame Lin deliberately set this trap, allowing the old widower to enter the rear courtyard of the Marquis's mansion. In my past life, I had inhaled so much of this perfume that my whole body went limp as mud. When that old widower, reeking of alcohol, kicked open the door and pounced on me like a starving wolf, I couldn't even manage a full cry for help. My innocence was brutally taken from me. Afterward, Madame Lin turned the tables on me, viciously berating me as a lewd and shameless woman who had shamelessly seduced my elder sister's suitor. In the end, I was carried out through the side gate in a palanquin that night and sent to the Marquis of Pingjiang's mansion. In that dark, sunless inner courtyard, Li Qingshan tortured me to death with a red-hot iron branding iron and a whip soaked in salt water. What are you staring at? Did you hear what I said? Seeing me staring intently at her, Mu Wan frowned impatiently, reached over, grabbed an embroidered handkerchief from the edge of the bed, and roughly flung it over my face. Cover your face completely. The guards outside are all mother's trusted men. As long as you don't make a sound, no one will come in. I lowered my eyelashes to hide the poisonous gloom in my eyes, and made my voice as soft and timid as it had been in my past life. Don't worry, elder sister. I won't make a sound. I'll definitely guard this room well for you. I'll give you credit for knowing your place. Mu Wan let out a soft hum, apparently in a hurry. She had no time for further conversation. She turned and strode quickly to the dressing table, fumbled for something, slipped it into her sleeve, then pushed open the door and, like a bird eager for a secret tryst, hurriedly vanished into the late autumn night. There was a soft click. The door was locked from the outside. That was someone sent by the Lin family. To ensure the prey inside the room couldn't escape, they had deliberately locked the door from the outside. The moment I heard the lock click, I threw back the brocade quilt without hesitation and rolled out of bed. Just inhaling that fleeting scent was enough to make my legs feel a bit weak and limp. The effects of this drunken spring breeze were even more potent than I remembered. I hurried behind the flower and bird screen, grabbed the pot of cold, day-old tea from the table, and, without even lifting the lid, poured it directly over the bronze crane incense burner, which was gently emitting wispy white smoke. SSSSH, the icy cold tea collided with the scorching hot cigarette ash, producing a muffled thud that made one's teeth ache. That wisp of cloyingly sweet, deadly smoke was instantly cut off, leaving only a foul, burnt smell. I let out a deep, heavy breath, and the sticky, stifling heat in my chest finally stopped spreading. Time was running out, and I didn't have a moment to catch my breath. I turned back to the four-poster bed, tucked the two long headrests on the inner side of the bed into the brocade quilt side by side, and shaped the quilt into an incredibly lifelike curve. At first glance, it looked just like a person sleeping on their side with their back to the outside. Then, I draped the embroidered handkerchief that Muwan had just dropped over the edge of the pillow, leaving it half exposed and half hidden. We can't stay in this house anymore. Li Qingshan could show up at any moment. The front gate was locked from the inside, and there were surely spies from the Lin family watching from outside. I looked around, and my gaze fell on the carved lattice window at the back of the inner chamber. That was the only exit leading to the alley on the west side of the marquis' mansion. Since it was in the shade, very few people ever passed through there. I quietly slid the window latch aside and gave the window a firm push. The late autumn night breeze, carrying a chill, instantly swept up my collar. Like a bucket of ice water poured over my head, completely blowing away the last traces of drowsiness left in my mind from the medication. I gripped the windowsill with both hands, took a deep breath, and flipped my body, leaping out the window as nimbly as a cat. As my feet touched the ground, the dry fallen leaves rustled ever so softly. I quickly pressed myself against the cold wall, using the deep darkness of the night and the dense banana leaves to conceal my figure. Just as I came to a stop, a series of extremely heavy footsteps suddenly echoed from the archway in the front yard. "My lord, please take your time and watch your step on the stairs. The eldest young lady is ill at the moment and resting inside." The lady said that, since you are so deeply in love, it would be perfectly fine to catch a glimpse of her from across the screen to ease your longing. It was the voice of Matron Wang, the most trusted aide at Lady Lin's side. The voice was laced with undisguised flattery and seduction. Immediately afterward, there was a deep, boisterous laugh punctuated by a loud belch. He he he. My mother-in-law really does care about this marquis. Sick? All the better, a sick beauty has a charm all her own. The moment that sound reached my ears, it felt as if all the blood in my body had suddenly reversed its flow. Li Qingshan. Through the layers upon layers of banana leaves, I stared intently at that man, who was dressed in a dark purple brocade robe adorned with cloud and thunder patterns and whose corpulent figure resembled that of a pig. His face was thick with fleshy features, and a sickening, lecherous gleam flickered in his eyes as he rubbed his hands together and strode impatiently toward the door of Muwan's bedchamber. The acrid smell of scorched flesh from that past life, and the excruciating pain of my bones being shattered piece by piece, surged through my mind like a raging tide. I clenched my teeth, a metallic, sweet and salty taste of rust welled up in my mouth, and only then did I manage to restrain myself from rushing forward and plunging those scissors into his neck. No rush. Now is not the time. I want them, the mother and daughter, to taste the bitter fruit of their own actions with their own mouths. Auntie Wang pulled a key from her sleeve, deftly unlocked the door, pushed it open just a crack, and then tactfully stepped back outside the courtyard gate to stand guard. Li Qingshan couldn't wait to push the door open and step inside. As soon as he did, he quickly bolted it shut behind him. There were no lights on inside the room, only moonlight streamed in through the window lattice. The false bulge on the bed was enough to fully unleash his animal instincts before he could see the truth. I curled the corners of my lips into a cold smile, hugged the wall, and turned to retreat into the deeper, darker, abandoned side courtyard. Tonight, this marquis' mansion is bound to be swept up in a bloodbath. I cannot remain anywhere where I might be searched. I must find a perfect hiding place immediately. Passing through two arched gateways, I arrived at the most secluded western courtyard of the marquis' mansion. This place had originally been a storage shed for old items. It had been abandoned for so long that even the night watch women were too lazy to come here. Just as I was about to push open the door of one of the unlocked wood sheds, I suddenly heard a series of extremely faint yet hurried footsteps coming from the quiet alleyway behind me. Damn it! That jade pendant was definitely at the bottom of the makeup box. If Mother finds out, Chu Lang is as good as dead. A deeply suppressed curse, tinged with a touch of impatience, drifted into my ears on the wind. My hand, which had been pushing the door, froze suddenly, and my pupils contracted sharply. It's Muwan. She actually turned back at a time like this? In her previous life, When she went to meet Chu Huan in secret, she didn't return this quickly. It seemed she realized halfway there that she had left behind the key token that could prove she was committing adultery, a capital offense, and had no choice but to risk returning to retrieve it. Great. It's as if even the heavens are on my side. The prey walked right back into the cage that had long been waiting for her. I didn't turn back to watch the spectacle that was about to unfold, because the faint sound of the night watchman's gong was already drifting in from the distance. If anyone discovered that I wasn't in my own room in the dead of night but was instead wandering around the western courtyard, it would surely get me into trouble. I immediately darted forward, pushed open the dusty wooden door of the woodshed, quickly slipped inside, and shut the door behind me with a backhand motion. It was pitch black inside the room. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. With my back against the door, I was just about to let out a deep breath to calm my racing heart. However, before I could even finish exhaling, a cold, bony hand, like an iron clamp, suddenly shot out of the darkness and clamped down tightly around my neck. Immediately afterward, a blade radiating a chilling, murderous intent pressed silently against my carotid artery. Move one more time. A deep, hoarse male voice, yet one that exuded a chilling aura of authority, echoed softly in my ear. And I'll take your life. The skin on the side of his neck already felt the stinging pain of the blade cutting through the epidermis, and warm drops of blood trickled slowly down the blade. In the darkness, the pungent smell of blood, mingled with a hint of crisp, deep incense, assaulted my nostrils. This was certainly not the scent of those fat, complacent guards at the home mansion. This man exuded a chilling, murderous intent born of years spent immersed in mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Even now, with his breathing heavy and his breath shallow, the overwhelming aura of a ruler still left one gasping for air. If this had been the timid, ignorant Mu Ji from her past life, she would likely have already screamed in terror by now, only to have her throat slit. People who have faced death once are the least afraid to risk their lives. I didn't struggle. I even deliberately slowed my breathing, pretending to be completely petrified with fear, and as his hand pressed against my wrist, my back gradually pressed against the rough door panel. Please spare my life. I lowered my voice, letting just the right amount of tremor slip into my tone. I'm just an unloved concubine's daughter in the marquis' household. I ran to this room for good-for-nothings to escape punishment. I didn't see a thing. The man's chest heaved heavily, and the grip on my neck not only didn't loosen but tightened even further. He didn't believe a word I said. In fact, he pushed the blade forward another inch. Just as he was about to strike, in the blink of an eye, my right hand, which had been hanging at my side, shot up suddenly. The moment I feigned weakness, I quietly pulled the sharp, gilded, engraved hairpin from my bun. Instead of blocking the dagger, which could cut through iron as if it were mud, I relied on the distance I'd gauged as I stepped back moments earlier, gripped the hairpin tightly, and thrust it viciously into his right side. Between his waist and abdomen, there was a faint, muffled plop. The golden hairpin pierced deep into the flesh, and his fingertips immediately came into contact with something warm and sticky. The man clearly hadn't expected that I, a seemingly delicate young lady, would dare to strike back at a moment like this. The excruciating pain made him let out a low, muffled groan. His body swayed violently, and the hand clamped around my neck involuntarily loosened by half an inch. Taking advantage of that half-inch gap, I quickly crouched and sidestepped, breaking free from the blade's grasp. At the same time, instead of retreating, I closed in on him and, with a backhand motion, pressed the hairpin, still stained with his blood, precisely against the pulsing artery in the crook of his neck. The balance of power between offense and defense shifted in an instant. I stared intently at those dark, cold, and menacing eyes in the darkness, my voice low and steady, with not a trace of the timidity I'd felt moments before. If you strike now, you might kill me, but the moment you do, this hairpin will pierce your carotid artery. The man leaned against a haystack piled high with odds and ends. Even though he was being held captive, his demeanor still exuded a chilling composure. By the faint moonlight streaming in through the window, I could finally make out his features. It was a face as stern and chiseled as if carved by a knife or an axe, with deep-set eyes and sharp features. Even now, with his face as pale as paper and a trace of blood trickling from the corner of his lips, He could not hide the arrogance that looked down on everyone from the very core of his being. My gaze swept rapidly over his waist. Just moments ago, as I thrust the hairpin downward, the back of my hand had brushed against a cold object. It was a token cast from black gold, faintly engraved with intricate totems. In all of Shangjing, the only person who would dare to have a token cast from Xian gold was the living lord of the underworld, Prince Jing Rongjing, who wielded immense power over both the court and the realm and presided over the northern command. The illegitimate daughter of the marquis' household? Rongjing chuckled softly, his laughter tinged with a biting chill. A fool like Li Qingshan, and yet he managed to raise a daughter as ruthless as you. Your Highness. You flatter me. I was merely trying to save my own life. The moment I revealed his true identity, I could clearly sense his tense muscles instantly brimming with an even purer intent to kill. You're so clever it makes one want to eliminate you on the spot. Rongjing gave his wrist a slight twist. The black iron dagger still pointed directly at my heart, showing no sign of being lowered despite my counterattack. Since you've recognized this prince, you should know what fate awaits anyone who dares to press this worthless hairpin against my vital point. All I know is that your highness appeared out of the blue in the inner quarters of the marquis' mansion, wounded as you are, and there must be people out there looking for you right now. The person who told you to hide here. Instead of backing away, I stepped forward, thrusting the hairpin forward to pierce a small patch of skin on the side of his neck. Your highness, your wounds are severe. This abandoned woodshed won't be able to hide the smell of blood. As a woman of the marquis' household, I can help cover for you to some extent. As if to confirm what I had said, a series of hurried footsteps and low voices suddenly echoed from the alleyway outside the woodshed. The blood trail ends at the western courtyard. Go in and search it. We absolutely cannot let him leave the home mansion alive. That was the assassin's voice. Rongjing's eyes narrowed slightly, and a sharp, dark gleam flashed in their depths. Although he wielded immense power, he was now deep within enemy territory and severely wounded. He was truly on his last legs. What do you want? He stared at me coldly, his voice reduced to a whisper. Let's seal the deal. I swiftly withdrew the hairpin, raised my left hand without hesitation, and slashed the palm of my hand hard with it. Blood gushed out instantly, dripping into the pile of dry grass on the ground, and the strong smell of blood immediately masked the scent of blood that had originally emanated from Rongjing. Rongjing watched my movements, and a barely perceptible flicker of emotion finally crossed his cold, hard gaze. I helped His Highness conceal his whereabouts and evade tonight's search. In exchange, His Highness owes me a favor. I tore a strip of clean fabric from my undershirt and casually wrapped it around my bleeding hand. Should I ever have a request in the future, I hope His Highness will honor his promise. Rongjing was silent for a moment, then sheathed the black iron dagger. He casually slipped a blood-jade ring of exceptionally rare quality off his thumb, flicked it with his finger, and the ring traced a faint glow through the darkness before landing precisely in my lap. I clutched the blood-red jade signet ring, which still held the remnants of his body heat. Though the cold jade pressed against the palm of my hand, it finally brought my heart, which had been suspended in midair, back down to earth. The footsteps outside grew closer and closer. The assassin's torch had already slipped through the cracks in the dilapidated window frame of the woodshed, shattering the light and shadows inside into fragments. I quickly crouched down, kicked over several bundles of scattered firewood nearby to skillfully block the corner where Rongjing was hiding, and then collapsed into a pile of straw on the other side, deliberately leaving my bleeding palm exposed. The door to the woodshed was violently kicked open. A biting night wind, laced with a murderous aura, swept in. Two assassins dressed in black, wielding gleaming steel blades, charged in like malevolent ghosts come to claim lives. Who's in there? I huddled in fear and let out a blood-curdling scream, perfectly portraying a timid concubine's daughter who had encountered a villain in the dead of night. Just as the two assassins' gaze was drawn to the blood covering my hands and their footsteps faltered for a split second, an extremely piercing scream, as if someone were being torn apart, suddenly rang out from the front yard. "Aw, let me go! Don't touch me!" The two assassins in black who were about to close in on me both froze in their tracks. In that split second, the sound of rapid gong strikes suddenly rang out from the front courtyard, accompanied by the chaotic shouts and clattering footsteps of the guards. Countless torchlights swiftly bathed half the night sky in a crimson glow. Is there a fire? Or did we get robbed? The sound is coming from the eldest young lady's courtyard. Hurry over there! Chaos reigned in the home mansion. The assassins exchanged glances, knowing full well that once they were cornered by the large contingent of guards, there would be no escape. One of them shot a fierce glare at me, the cowardly concubine's daughter, then sheathed his sword without hesitation. Like night owls, the two of them smashed through another rotten wooden window in the woodshed and vanished into the depths of the night in the blink of an eye. The tension finally eased, and I let out a long sigh as I pushed myself up against the cold wall. By the faint glow filtering in from outside the door, I glanced toward the corner. Rongjing was still leaning back in the shadows, his breathing faint but steady. His bottomless eyes were fixed on me. He offered no thanks and made no further probing remarks, but simply gazed at me as if appraising his prey, etching my appearance into his memory. Without saying another word, I tied the strip of cloth in my palm securely, smoothed out the wrinkles in my skirt, and strode quickly out of the woodshed. Following the chaotic flow of people, I slipped silently into the line of servants heading toward the front courtyard. At that moment, the area outside Muwan's courtyard was packed so tightly that not even a drop of water could seep through. I kept my head bowed, hiding behind a few maidservants, and through a gap in the crowd, I watched coldly as the mother and daughter staged this drama of their own making. The door to the main room was still locked tight from the inside. The sounds coming from within were nothing short of gruesome. The man's heavy breathing and lewd laughter mingled with the dull thuds of flesh being whipped, each sound louder than the last. You little slut. What are you hiding from? Since your mother accepted this marquis' gift and sent you in here, all cleaned up and stripped bare, why are you still pretending to be so virtuous and chaste? Li Qingshan's voice betrayed a sickening excitement. This flesh and skin of yours is even more tender than this marquis imagined. I just wonder how many lashes it can take. Ha ha ha. Accompanied by his maniacal laughter, there was a sharp crack, the sound of a leather whip lashing viciously against flesh. Immediately afterward, a deeply stifled sob came from inside the room. The sound had been distorted by fear and pain, becoming so hoarse that it was almost unrecognizable. Everyone, step back! Step back! Lady Lin, the matriarch, hurried over, flanked by a crowd of maidservants, her clothes and hair still disheveled. Seeing the courtyard filled with people, she immediately asserted her authority as the head matriarch and snapped, "It's nothing more than a stray cat that disturbed the young lady's rest. Who gave you permission to gather here? Get out of here at once." "My lady, that doesn't sound right. Something must have happened inside. Shall I break down the door?" A loyal guard, unaware of the situation, stepped forward anxiously and asked for permission. "How dare you?" Lady Lin's eyebrows shot up in anger, and she immediately slapped the guard across the face. "How dare you barge into my master's courtyard? Matron Wang, get this bunch of ill-mannered fools out of here at once." As soon as Matron Wang received the order and was about to step forward to shoo them away, a piercing scream suddenly rang out from inside the room, followed by a dull thud as something heavy struck the door. "Mom! Save me! Mom!" The sound was no longer a hoarse whimper, but a piercing scream born of excruciating pain. Every word was steeped in tears and blood, piercing through the carved door panels with crystal clarity to strike the eardrums of everyone in the courtyard. Mrs. Lin, who had been scolding her servant just a moment before, suddenly fell silent. In an instant, all the color drained from her well-preserved face, leaving it as white as paper. That voice. Matron Wang was also terrified out of her wits. Her legs gave way and she nearly fell to her knees. "Madam, that's the eldest young lady's voice." Lin was struck as if by lightning, and her body swayed violently. She couldn't believe her ears. Muwan had clearly left earlier under the pretext of going to fetch something. So how could she be in the room? Yet that voice calling out mother with a tremor of tears was undeniably the child she had carried for 10 months and doted on for 16 years, the apple of her eye. "Open the door! Open the door for me! Quick!" Mrs. Lin threw herself at the door like a madwoman, pounding on it with both hands so hard she didn't even notice that her nail-polished fingernails were breaking. Auntie Wang's hands trembled as she fumbled for the key. The more anxious she became, the harder it was to unlock the door. Mrs. Lin's eyes turned red with frustration, and she screamed harshly, "Break it down! Break that door down for me. Several guards immediately stepped forward and, with combined force, rammed the doors. With a loud clang, the two carved wooden doors crashed to the ground, exposing the horrific scene inside to everyone's view. A strong smell of alcohol and a nauseating stench of blood hit me in the face. The floor was littered with shards of porcelain and torn, autumn-hued garments. Li Qingshan stood bare-chested, clutching a blood-stained writing crop tightly in his hand, and the woman he was standing on, scantily clad and her body covered in bruises from the whip, was none other than Mu Wan, who was supposed to be out meeting her lover in secret. She had originally intended to sneak in through the side window to retrieve the jade pendant she'd left on the dressing table. But the room was pitch black, and she ended up crashing straight into the arms of Li Qingshan, who was already burning with lust. Li Qingshan was a sadistic madman who didn't care in the least who was in his arms. Fueled by the lingering effects of the drugs and alcohol, he dragged her to the floor and assaulted her. Wanner! Mrs. Lin let out a heart-wrenching wail, scrambling toward her on all fours, snatching the brocade quilt from the bed, and wrapping it tightly around Mu Wan's horrifyingly mangled body. Li Qingshan was in the thick of things when he was suddenly interrupted, and a surge of rage welled up within him. He narrowed his bloodshot, drunken eyes, upon recognizing the woman as a member of the Lin family. Far from restraining himself, he instead grinned, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth. My mother-in-law, you've arrived just in time. What a fine daughter you've raised. She's already crying her eyes out after just a few touches, ruining this marquis' fun. You beast! You beast! Mrs. Lin was shaking with rage. She turned and shouted at the guards outside the door. What are you standing there for? Tie him up! The entire courtyard was in utter chaos, with shouts of alarm, curses, and the sounds of people struggling to pull one another apart all mingling together, making it seem like a living hell. Mu Wan huddled inside the brocade quilt, shivering uncontrollably. Her once beautiful face was now severely swollen, and blood was still trickling down the side of her forehead. When she struggled to lift her head amid the chaos and caught sight of me standing on the outskirts, neatly dressed and unscathed, through a gap in the crowd, her pupils, which had been dilated with fear, suddenly contracted. The extreme humiliation and rage unleashed a chilling power within her. She suddenly wriggled half her body out of Lin's embrace, her blood-stained fingers pointing at me like withered branches. It's her! Mother! It's that bitch Mu Xi who ruined me! Lin stiffened all over and slowly turned her head. Those bloodshot eyes pierced through the dense crowd like a blade steeped in deadly poison, fixing themselves firmly on me. My knees gave way, and I fell to my knees with a thud on the cold blue stone slabs. All the color drained from my face in an instant. Tears streamed down my cheeks like beads on a broken string, and my frail shoulders shook like a sieve in the autumn wind. I played the part of a concubine's daughter, caught up in a calamity for no reason in the dead of night and utterly terrified, to perfection. Eldest sister, surely you're not delirious from the pain? What on earth are you talking about? I looked up, my face filled with fear and disbelief, my voice thick with tears from extreme terror. Mother, send for the family physician at once. Eldest sister has been so terribly frightened that she's already started rambling. You shameless bitch, how dare you try to wriggle out of this? Mrs. Lin's eyes bulged with fury. She sprang to her feet, strode toward me in a few quick steps, and raised her hand to slap me hard. It must be you, that wicked, evil spawn, who secretly did something to bring this upon your eldest sister. Mother, please understand. I didn't flinch or try to dodge. Instead, I slammed my head hard against the blue-green stone slab, leaving a red, swollen mark on my forehead in an instant. Before her slap could land, I raised my voice and shouted, enunciating each word clearly. The door to the main hall has been locked from the outside by Matron Wang since dusk. She personally conveyed Mother's orders, stating that my eldest sister had contracted a severe cold and required rest. No one was permitted to set foot in the courtyard. I spent the entire night in the side room of the western wing, copying the Lotus Sutra in preparation for grandmother's upcoming birthday, and only hurried here with the night watch women after hearing the thunderous clang of the bronze gong in the front courtyard. I paused for a moment, raised my tear-filled eyes, and met Mrs. Lin's venomous gaze with open honesty. My voice trembled but rang out clearly. Just now, The head of the courtyard guards and his men forced that door open from the outside, right in front of you and all the servants in the courtyard. If I had truly harmed my eldest sister inside the room, as she claims, how could I have magically passed through walls and the ground to lock myself out, only to then blend into the crowd? As soon as those words were spoken, a low murmur of whispers immediately filled the courtyard, which had previously been as quiet as a grave. The guards and servants weren't fools. The door was locked tight, and Matron Wang had kept the key on her person the whole time. How could the third young lady, a frail daughter of a concubine, possibly have gotten in to harm anyone? On the contrary, it was the Marquis of Pingjiang who appeared in the first young lady's bedchamber in the dead of night. That was what was truly baffling. Mu Wan saw that I had completely exonerated myself with just a few words, and she was so furious she was trembling all over. Her swollen, red face was contorted with venom as she screamed recklessly. "You're lying. The candle lit in that room was clearly meant for you to be lying in that bed. You set me up. Was I supposed to be lying in my eldest sister's bed?" I feigned just the right amount of confusion and shock, looking at her innocently. "What on earth are you talking about? Eldest sister? This is your bedroom. Naturally, you should be the one in your own bed. Didn't you say earlier today that you wanted to sweat it out in here? Why are you now blaming me for not lying in your bed? Could it be that you never intended to stay in here in the first place, but wanted someone else to lie there in your place?" I asked this question very gently and subtly, yet it struck like a sledgehammer, hitting Mrs. Lin right where it hurt the most. Mrs. Lin's hand, which had been raised high, froze midair in an instant. She was an extremely intelligent matriarch, and my single remark jolted her awake, causing her mind to explode with realization. That's right, she personally administered that intoxicating drunken spring breeze. She had Auntie Wang lock the door, and she set the trap. According to the original plan, it should be me, Mu Ji, lying there right now, my reputation in tatters. If Mu Wan continues to blab on like this, won't she be exposing, in front of all the servants in the courtyard, the shameful truth that she and her mother schemed to frame the concubine's daughter and secretly led an elderly widower into the inner quarters? If word of this were to get out, not only would the reputation of the Marquis of Pingjiang's household be tarnished, but Mu Wan, the legitimate daughter who was originally destined to marry into the Eastern Palace as a secondary consort to the Crown Prince, would be utterly ruined. Even the Lin family would be dragged into the scandal as a result. "Shut up!" Mrs. Lin weighed the pros and cons in the blink of an eye, then whipped her hand around and slapped Mu Wan hard across the face. A sharp snap cut off the truth that Mu Wan was about to blurt out. Mu Wan was struck so hard that her head jerked to the side. A trickle of blood trickled from the corner of her mouth as she stared in disbelief at her mother, who had always treated her like a precious treasure. "Mother, you hit me? You've gone mad with humiliation, you've lost your mind. Now shut your mouth." Mrs. Lin gritted her teeth, her eyes brimming with warning and heartbreak, then turned to cast a fierce glance around at the servants in the courtyard. What happened today was merely the Marquis of Pingjiang stumbling into the back courtyard while drunk and startling the eldest young lady. If anyone dares to spread even a single word of gossip outside, I'll cut out your tongues and sell you into the lowest class brothels. I lowered my gaze to hide the trace of mocking coldness in my eyes. That's what you get, that's how it usually goes. They dug this abyss with their own hands, and now they have no choice but to swallow the bitter consequences themselves, while doing everything in their power to cover up the unspeakable truth. By now, Li Qingshan had sobered up 7 or 8 parts of the way. Looking at the scene before him, he knew he'd slept with the wrong woman, but as a marquis of high standing, how could he possibly be afraid of a mere woman of the inner quarters? He let out a cold laugh, rose to his feet leisurely, and was just about to utter some sarcastic remark. Just then, Mu Wan, reeling from the force of the slap she'd just received, fell heavily back onto the brocade quilt. There was a sharp clink, an object slipped from her disheveled collar, hit the scattered shards of porcelain on the floor, and rolled to Li Qingshan's feet. It was a pendant made of exquisite quality milk-white jade, carved with intricate intertwined branches patterns. In the light of the torches, it glowed with a warm, lustrous sheen. Li Qingshan glanced down. His face, which had been wearing a lecherous grin just moments before, instantly darkened. He bent down to pick up the jade pendant, turned it over in his hand a couple of times, and then suddenly turned to look at Mrs. Lin. A cold glint, like that of a venomous snake, flashed in his murky eyes. Mother-in-law, the character Chu engraved on this jade pendant is truly unique. The milky white jade pendant glowed with a faint, chilling light in Li Qingshan's rough, calloused hand. The character Chu, carved with stark precision into the jade, struck the mother and daughter like a bolt of lightning, thunderously exploding above their heads. "Give it back! That's mine!" Mu Wan's pupils suddenly contracted, and, ignoring the excruciating, tearing pain in her body, she screamed and lunged at Li Qingshan. But in her current, battered state, she was no match for Li Qingshan. Before she could even reach him, he kicked her squarely in the chest, sending her crashing back onto the floor littered with broken porcelain shards, where she let out a desperate, agonized scream. "Yours?" Li Qingshan let out a sinister, cackling laugh, his murky eyes lingering on Mu Wan's scantily clad body as if appraising a piece of livestock up for sale. "What a haughty and arrogant legitimate daughter of the marquis' household. I thought you were an innocent young thing who'd never even been touched by a man. But who would have guessed that hidden beneath your close-fitting clothes was a token from the Chu family's young master? No wonder you struggled so fiercely on the bed just now. It turns out you've already got another man in your heart. Your Grace, watch your tongue." Mrs. Lin, like a she-wolf cornered, interrupted him with a shrill cry. She then whipped her head around, her venomous eyes fixed intently on me, her fingernails digging so deep into the flesh of her palms they were nearly breaking the skin. "This jade pendant must be a memento from that shameless slut Mu Xi's illicit affair. Someone, tie up this little slut for me." When they heard this, several old women were about to step forward to grab me. I remained kneeling on the cold blue stone slabs, offering no resistance, simply holding my back straight. By the flickering light of the fire, I looked at Mrs. Lin's face, slightly contorted with extreme panic, and a hint of just the right amount of desolation and sorrow flickered in her eyes. If mother wishes her daughter to die, she need only grant me a white silk sash. Why resort to such a flimsy excuse to humiliate me? My voice wasn't loud, but it rang out with exceptional clarity in the deathly silent courtyard, each word striking a precise chord in everyone's hearts. I tilted my head back slightly as tears trickled down the corners of my eyes, meeting Li Qingshan's scrutinizing gaze without flinching. As an illegitimate daughter whose birth mother died young, my monthly allowance amounts to no more than 2 liang of. I can barely afford to buy a few decent sets of headdresses. How could I possibly have come into contact with a man from outside the family, such as my cousin from the Chu family? And how could I have obtained this priceless piece of? I paused for a moment, my gaze slowly shifting to Mu Wan, who was trembling as she lay on the ground. A note of disbelief and astonishment crept into my voice. Besides, last month when my cousin came to the manor with my aunt for a banquet, while we were resting in the plum grove, didn't you, eldest sister, praise the jade pendant at my cousin's waist for its exceptional translucency right in front of everyone? If you liked it, you should have just said so. Why did you hide it under your undergarments? As soon as the words were spoken, the courtyard was suddenly plunged into a deathly silence. Although the maids and servants who usually attended to her kept their heads bowed, they could not hide the shock in their eyes. The third young lady was right. How could a concubine's daughter, who rarely even stepped outside the courtyard gate, possibly have obtained the Chu family young master's personal jade pendant? On the other hand, the first young lady was always seen fawning over her aunt and had grown up alongside the Chu young master since childhood. With just the two of them alone, and each keeping their token close to their body, what else could it be for? Excellent. Absolutely excellent. Li Qingshan toyed with the jade pendant in his hand, his eyes brimming with greed and scheming. Mother-in-law, I feel unworthy of such a generous gift from you. Originally, I had only intended to take home a docile concubine's daughter to warm my bed, but now it seems this legitimate daughter is indeed far more intoxicating. He took a step forward and, without the slightest hesitation, lifted Mu Wan's chin with the tip of his foot, grinning savagely. Since Wanner and this marquis have already consummated our marriage, I can magnanimously overlook this ill-omened affair of her carrying a token from another man. First thing tomorrow morning, I'll send someone to bring a palanquin to carry Warner through the side gate and into the marquis' mansion. Though you cannot be my primary wife, I can certainly grant you the status of a noble concubine. A concubine? Mrs. Lin reacted like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, instantly letting out a piercing scream. You're dreaming. My Warner is the future crown prince's secondary consort. How dare you? You old scoundrel. Even suggest she become a concubine? The crown prince's secondary consort? Li Qingshan snorted coldly, waving the jade pendant in front of Mrs. Lin's face. His tone was menacing. Do you believe me or not? All I have to do is take this to Shentian Prefecture and let the whole capital hear me imitate the cries your fine daughter made in bed tonight. And by tomorrow she'll be drowned in the moat. Lin's legs gave way. She could no longer hold herself up and collapsed onto the ground. She looked at Mu Wan, whose face was streaked with tears and who seemed to wish she were dead. Then at the menacing Li Qingshan, and a flash of extreme, frenzied murderous intent suddenly flickered in her eyes. She couldn't let Mu Wan be ruined, absolutely not. As long as she could keep Li Qingshan confined to the inner quarters for good tonight. Claimed to the outside world that he'd been attacked by bandits, and then pin the blame on Mu Ji, there would still be a chance to turn things around. Auntie Wang. Mrs. Lin's hands trembled as she lowered her voice and gave her trusted confidant standing beside her a look that said, "We're in this together, sink or swim." Just as Matron Wang caught on and quietly stepped back, preparing to summon the hidden guards to kill Li Qingshan on the spot, the tightly closed moon-shaped gate at the perimeter of the courtyard was suddenly kicked open from the outside. A dull thud, mingled with the howling of the night wind. Immediately afterward, a stern male voice, laced with thunderous fury, struck everyone's hearts like a sledgehammer. "It's the middle of the night, what kind of shameful, sordid business are you all up to here?" The man who entered was none other than my father, Mu Xing, the Marquis of Yongyi. Draped in a dark cloak, he strode through the shattered arched doorway, his face as somber as dark clouds looming over the city. Behind him, supported on either side by several senior maidservants, stood my grandmother, her face pale with rage and gasping for breath. "Your Grace." Mrs. Lin, as if clinging to her last hope, scrambled and crawled toward her father's boots, weeping bitterly. "You must avenge our Warner. That beast." The Marquis of Pingjiang took advantage of his drunkenness to barge into the inner chambers and actually took our daughter by force. "You ignorant, foolish woman. Shut your mouth." Father kicked Mrs. Lin hard, sending her flying. His gaze swept over the door that had crashed to the ground. Li Qingshan, whose clothes were in disarray, and finally settled firmly on Mu Wan, who lay wrapped in a blood-stained brocade quilt, looking as if she were a pile of mud. The veins on his temples throbbed violently. Faced with his father's murderous glare, Li Qingshan showed not the slightest fear. Instead, he let out a cold laugh and leisurely tossed the sheep's fat jade pendant at his father's feet, his tone brimming with derision. "Marquis Yongyi, before you let your virtuous wife make these baseless accusations, you'd better get your facts straight. Was it this Marquis who trespassed? Or did your matriarch secretly order someone to lock the door from the outside, deliberately trapping this Marquis here with your pure as ice and jade legitimate daughter, who's carrying a token from her lover?" My father's gaze fell on the jade pendant engraved with the character Chu lying on the ground, and his pupils suddenly contracted. Having spent many years in the inner quarters, how could he fail to discern the underlying meaning behind those words? I remained obediently kneeling in the shadows of the corner, shrugging my shoulders just slightly and letting out an extremely soft, stifled sob. "Father, please calm down. There must have been some mistake." Mother merely instructed Matron Wang to lock the door so that my eldest sister could recover from her cold. She would never have deliberately set a trap. Besides, that cloyingly sweet scent in the room was probably just meant to soothe the mind. How could Mother possibly use a vicious poison like drunken spring breeze to harm anyone? Every word and every sentence I spoke was meant to exonerate the Lin family. Yet those phrases, locking the door, Auntie Wang, and drunk in the spring breeze, were like the sharpest steel needles, piercing my father's already frayed nerves with unerring precision. The father whipped his head around and barked an order at the bodyguards behind him. "Go inside and search that incense burner." The bodyguard acknowledged the order and, moments later, hurried out carrying a Boshan incense burner caked with sticky residue. With a grim expression, he reported, "My lord, there are indeed traces of a potent aphrodisiac incense at the bottom of the burner, and the amount is substantial." The evidence was irrefutable. The locked door, the potent aphrodisiac, the matron who led the way. What a vicious and meticulously planned plot to wipe out the family line. The look in his father's eyes as he gazed at Lady Lynn instantly stripped away all traces of marital affection, leaving only bone-chilling loathing and cold calculation. How could he fail to see that this was originally a sordid scheme Lady Lin had devised to destroy a concubine's daughter and thereby climb the social ladder to the Marquis of Pingjiang? Yet, by a twist of fate, it had completely dragged in his legitimate daughter, the one in whom he had placed the highest hopes and whom he intended to use to secure a position of prominence. Not only did she ruin her reputation, but she also dropped a token of affection she had exchanged with another man right in front of everyone. "You wicked woman! You good-for-nothing fool who only causes trouble." My father delivered a resounding slap with the back of his hand, sending Mrs. Lin spinning halfway around in place before she slammed hard onto the blue stone steps, blood instantly trickling from the corner of her mouth. The old lady was so furious she was trembling all over. She slammed her rosewood cane down on the ground with a deafening thud, pointed at Mrs. Lin's nose, and shouted a torrent of abuse. "What a disgrace! The Mu family's century-old reputation has been completely ruined by your underhanded tactics." Mu Wan looked at her father and grandmother, who usually doted on her, but now saw only disgust and coldness in their eyes. She finally realized what she was about to face. Overcome by extreme fear, she let out a piercing scream and scrambled toward her father, reaching out to grab the hem of his robe. "Father, I'm being framed. It's Mu Ji, she's the one who set me up. Hurry up and shut this disgraceful little monster up." Her father didn't even glance at her. His tone was as icy as a death warrant from hell. The old women pounced on her like wolves and tigers, using coarse hemp cloth to stifle Mu Wan's desperate, piercing screams, to preserve what little dignity remained for the Marquis of Yongyi's household and to prevent his political enemies in the imperial court from seizing upon this as grounds for impeachment. Her father struck a sordid, under-the-table deal with Li Qingshan right then and there. Before dawn had even broken, a small green clay palanquin, devoid even of red silk trim, was quietly carried out through the most secluded side gate in the back courtyard. The eldest legitimate sister, who had once been arrogant and full of joy as she awaited her role as a secondary consort to the crown prince, was thus treated like a filthy object unfit for the light of day and silently sent into the monstrous, labyrinthine compound of the Marquis of Pingjiang's mansion. As for Lady Lin, her grandmother, citing a sudden serious illness requiring quiet convalescence, immediately stripped her of her authority over the household and had her dragged to the family temple that very night, where she was placed under strict house arrest. After several days of turmoil, this grim farce finally came to an end. Returning to that humble side room in the west wing, I dismissed the maidservant who was about to follow me in and sat alone before the dim, yellowish bronze mirror. Reflected in the mirror was a pale face that could not hide its delicate beauty. I slowly exhaled a breath of stale air, and the tension in my back finally began to ease, little by little. But I know better than anyone that, though I've escaped the fatal trap of my past life, the Marquis of Yongyi's mansion is by no means a place where I can stay for long. My father is cold-hearted by nature. His eyes see nothing but the family's interests. Just as he was willing to sacrifice his most beloved legitimate daughter, Mu Wan, today for the sake of political maneuvering, tomorrow he could just as easily treat me, a concubine's daughter with no roots of my own, like a commodity to be weighed and sold off for other bargaining chips. If I wish to truly take control of my own destiny, I cannot remain confined to the petty power struggles within these inner quarters. I must devise a plan for myself that will allow me to leap completely out of this quagmire. The night breeze swept past the half-open lattice window, causing the candle flame on the desk to flicker twice. "Third young lady," that was quite a move. A deep male voice, tinged with a touch of mockery, rang out unexpectedly from the night outside the window. My heart skipped a beat, and I whipped my head around. There, beneath the begonia tree outside the window, a slender, upright figure had appeared, I didn't know when. Moonlight pierced through the clouds, outlining the man's cool, jade-like silhouette. His dark gold brocade robe fluttered gently in the night breeze, exuding an unmistakable aura of authority. Rongjing. I stood up and, through the window, curtsied gracefully toward that figure. My voice soft yet remarkably steady. Your Highness seems to have recovered fully. Since you are here in the dead of night, surely you are not here merely to mock this humble servant's meager self-defense tactics from the inner quarters? Rongjing chuckled softly. He walked slowly toward me, and through the window bars, those bottomless black eyes gazed quietly at me, as if appraising a rare and unexpected treasure. I had always thought the Marquis of Yoni's household was full of nothing but sycophantic fools. I never imagined that hidden within this courtyard full of filth would be a formidable figure like third young lady, so sharp-witted and ruthless in her actions. His long, slender fingers tapped lightly against the windowsill, producing a series of rhythmic, soft clicks. It's just a pity that your father is blind in both sight and heart. After all, this Marquis' mansion will never be able to hold someone of your caliber. I raised my eyes and met his gaze without flinching, choosing my words carefully as I probed. Your Highness visited the rear courtyard of this residence a few days ago, though I do not know why. I presume your Highness is destined for great things. Given your Highness's delicate constitution, it would naturally be inconvenient for you to come and go as you please in the inner quarters. Although the inner courtyard is mostly inhabited by women, it is precisely there that confidential information circulates. Although I am not the legitimate daughter, I am still a legitimate young lady of the Marquis of Yoni's household. I wonder if your Highness might need some informants. Rongjing's hand paused slightly as he tapped the windowsill. He lowered his gaze to look at me. The amusement in his eyes gradually faded, replaced by a deep, intense gaze that was both oppressive and scrutinizing. If my senses are dull or unresponsive, it will cost this prince his life. His voice was extremely low, yet it carried a weight that sent a chill down one's spine. Since I've dared to volunteer, I'm confident I can do it. I pursed my lips slightly, letting the night breeze blow the stray strands of hair from my ears, a hint of defiant sparkle lighting up my eyes. It remains to be seen whether His Highness the Crown Prince dares to take me. The night grew even darker. Rongjing didn't answer right away. He just gave me a deep look, a look that held so many unspoken meanings, then turned and vanished silently into the boundless darkness of the night. But I know that in this cramped, confined world of the inner quarters, I have finally torn open a crack of light. As for this grand game of chess for the world, which has just begun, I am only now about to make my first move. That's the end of the story. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. Thank you.